Hello and welcome to Libraryland Conversations. This is our continuing opportunity to highlight and learn from smart, dedicated people in library ecosystem. I am Adam Zan, president of the Libraryland Project.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Peverill-Conti, the executive director of the Libraryland Project. And these conversations really serve as an opportunity for Adam and me to stay in touch with the library community. We really miss visiting the libraries, library workers, library patrons, library fans, the library ecosystem, all the things we love about libraries. But here we are bringing it to you, and we're going to talk to a special guest today. And Adam, I think you're on to talk about our special guest.
We are excited to continue a conversation with somebody we met with this week. I'm going to introduce and let her speak. Christina McPhillips is the Vice President of Business Development at Carlbloom Associates. And Carlbloom Associates, we'll learn a lot more in a second, but they are a full-service direct marketing agency dedicated to helping nonprofits basically raise more money and get noticed a little bit more. So today we're going to talk about our shared love of libraries. We're going to get a little more detailed about fundraising strategies for libraries, foundations, and friends groups. We'll talk about the formation and concept of something called Library Giving Day. And we'll close with some favorite library memories. And with that, I will say thanks for joining us today, Christina.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, this is awesome. So I first learned about Carlbloom and Christina McPhillips when researching an upcoming event, which I mentioned, Library Giving Day. And we're going to learn a little bit more about that. But I guess we always sort of start off with a little bit of a career path question. So how did you get involved in fundraising?
I don't think that I've actually been asked that one before. I studied film in college and moved out to LA with some buddies and went to work in the fashion industry. And after about a year of doing that, thought I'm not helping anyone. And I really want to dedicate my life to helping people. I've got to figure out a different way to do that. So I started working for nonprofits shortly after that.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Now, Adam mentioned a little bit about Carlbloom. Can you talk a little bit about the focus and kind of the involvement with libraries?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with many different kinds of nonprofits, PBS and NPR stations around the country. We work with cancer organizations and environmental groups and Habitats for Humanity, but the biggest group that we serve is libraries in North America. We do fundraising campaigns for them, so that's things like direct mail and email and social media and website redesign and that kind of thing. But we really also focus on our efforts on Library Giving Day and the International Public Library Fundraising Conference, which we hold every summer. And that's an educational opportunity for library fundraisers to really come together and network, but also learn what's going on in the wide world of fundraising.
And you mentioned to us when we spoke the other day, just how the response to that conference and how many people are involved. It was really heartening to hear.
Yeah, it's been great. Really great networking for everyone.
Yeah, at the end, and obviously in the credits of this video, we'll post some links to that because we're hoping to join you, and I think a lot of people listening in today would get value out of that. And as I said, we'll talk about Library Giving Day in a second. I guess I want to dig down a little deeper to those library professionals who might be out there. Do you think there are fundamentals that sort of every library worker or everybody who's sort of associated with library needs to think about when it comes to fundraising?
Yeah, I do. You know, I think that we have seen, well, we've been fundraising for libraries or with libraries for 45 years, but if there were any year that were going to be in question as to whether or not fundraising from libraries, communities was strong, it would have been 2020. You would expect that because of the drastic economic downturn that people wouldn't be giving to nonprofits, but it was, for libraries, it was one of the greatest years of giving we've ever seen. And that's because libraries became an essential service. And so I want to impart to all libraries that Your community wants to give to you, and you just need to ask.
I love that. It harkens back to Amanda Palmer. Just ask. So you mentioned libraries, but how about library foundations and friends group? Should they have like a slightly different way of thinking about fundraising?
No, I don't think they should. I mean, foundations that we work with, and we do largely work with a lot of foundations. Foundations can be the fundraising arm of the library. And what I like to see, what I think is the most effective form of fundraising is when the foundation and the library are really good buddies and they have a really strong symbiotic relationship, and the understanding is that the foundation exists to benefit the library and raise money on behalf of the library so that they may continue or increase the programs and services that are serving the community. So I would say fundraising is a partnership very much within your own foundation organization, but you need to be best friends with your libraries in order to make it all work. We're all rooting for the same goal of improving our communities through the services that we provide. So that is my core fundraising belief for all libraries and foundations and friends groups.
Excellent. That's really very, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest things, obviously, that libraries fundraise for, whether it's directly or through friends or foundations, are capital campaigns around expansions or new constructions. Can you talk about that? Because that feels like a special kind of fundraising and one that's really important.
Sure. We've seen it with a lot of libraries and a lot of foundations of different sizes where the goal is to increase the space, build a new, wing or a new area or just change the library in some way. The community wants to give. Time and time again, you see that the community comes to bat for those libraries and those foundations that are asking. We ourselves don't do that. So I love to learn from groups that do that, because so many foundations and libraries really need that help. But there is just a sense of the community stepping up when a library or foundation needs to add on to its physical space and run a capital campaign. You see great examples. I know Billings, Montana has done one in recent years. Of course, Seattle Public Library Foundation did one many years ago, and they have a beautiful structure. And that's something that your community can be proud of because they helped you build it.
That's awesome. And we might want to ask you about Seattle a little bit later. So a bigger picture question, what trends in library fundraising, are most exciting you right now? And you mentioned the pandemic, but it can really be anything. Like what's out there that people should know about?
Yeah, so the trend that I really love right now is something that we're starting to experiment with. It's capitalizing on virtual events and making them truly fundraising events. So it's, forging a relationship, a personalized relationship with your different donors or people in the community that you want to become donors, and having really awesome, exciting events that the whole community can come to. And what I really love, and I'm a fundraiser, so I'm always thinking, let's get that donation too. A lot of the platforms that exist now for these virtual events actually have fundraising software built in. So somebody's watching your, a local author talk about how much they loved going to the library growing up. They can hit donate on the actual virtual event screen, have it pop up, and make this micro donation that's altruistic and motivated by this great emotion that they're having through your virtual event. These virtual events, when done well, they act as relationship builders for your donors and your community for many, many, many months. So, and people want that insider experience. And this is what I really love about the virtual events and why, to me, it's the technology that matters right now. That is how you can give everyone that one-on-one experience, that you're invited to our event and we want to tell you what we've been doing and how we've been improving our community. So that's my favorite right now.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think back to my fundraising experience, and we would spend almost 11 months a year working up to a fundraising banquet.
Oh, yeah.
And everything went into that. And obviously there's lots of overhead, the hotel and travel. And maybe, it's not all bad, I guess, with the virtual platform, because you're right. Anybody can access it, like we're doing right now, and there's that interactivity. We were talking to the Howard County Library in Maryland, and they did a fabulous fundraising event all around a virtual tour to Italy, and they had 3 authors who presented, and you could buy their book in advance and do like virtual signatures or something like that. So,
I love it. I love it. That's my home state. Also, I want to go to Italy.
So maybe it's archived. Maybe the event's archived. You can go back and watch. You can do your tour. So
I suspect it is. So on the, I mean, what Adam's describing is obviously a pretty creative event that took place at that library system. You talked about virtual events, and we've heard not just from libraries how virtual events are working. Are there other sort of creative fundraising programs that you've seen either coming out of COVID or during the pandemic that you think are really notable?
That is an excellent question. I love, my brain goes back to one other thing that is sort of virtual, but it is morning coffee. There's a executive director at a library foundation in the Midwest, and she does morning coffee with donors. And it is very intimate, and it is done, I believe, through Zoom. And she has 2 or 3 donors. Sometimes they're major donors, so those are folks giving sometimes $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 or above. But it's a really casual conversation, and it's one the donors might not have been able to say yes to pre-COVID because they might have had to go off to work, or it would have been too much to go travel down to the central library location. But I think the intimacy that comes with something like that is vital. I also love to see libraries are starting to do things like texting alongside their direct mail and email campaigns. There is a lot more knowledge of things like Google Ad Grants and how valuable that free money is to a nonprofit and to a library. So libraries are really starting to advocate on their own behalf that they can be like the big guys too. They can be like the World Wildlife Funds and, March of Dimes, all these groups that are doing massive, very sophisticated fundraising. Libraries can be like that too.
So that's awesome. Really, so you bring up like the tools that are out there, and I'm wondering, there's so many vendors that have like donor management, donor communications, actual donor processing. If I was at a friends group or a foundation, I would throw my hands up. Like, do you have any advice for a library foundations and friends to figure out which tools to even use?
Yeah, I definitely do. I've got 2 pieces of advice. There is a Facebook group that's called the International Public Library Forum, which is an offshoot from the conference that happens every summer for fundraisers. It's a great place, a great group on Facebook for library fundraisers to ask questions. So I know somebody just posed the other day, hey, we're thinking of switching from our very well-known CRM database that houses all of our donor information to another one. Hey, everyone, what do you like out there? What do you think? And so their peers are the ones that can actually respond to them. I also want to offer up going to the conference, which this year is June 8th and 9th. There are roundtables and meeting rooms for you to network and ask your peers, and they'll tell honestly, I do like this CRM, I don't like this CRM, or we tried this donation platform, it didn't work for us because of blank. So I think before the conference came along, there was a lot of isolation with these individual libraries all across the country, but the conference really just provides an opportunity for them to ask each other, what would you do? What are you doing? What has your experience been?
Yeah, did that come up organically, or did you help form that Facebook group? Like,
we formed the Facebook group, and I think it was after the 1st or 2nd year, because the feedback in the post-conference survey was that the number one thing everyone got out of it was meeting their peers and having those conversations. And so we thought, well, we should probably do some kind of Facebook group so they can continue to talk throughout the year. And it's been great because now a lot of them have forged these professional relationships with each other where they call each other up and say, How are you building your board? How are you finding quality board members? What does your direct mail piece look like at year end? You know, how many staff members do you have? Just little questions.
Awesome.
That's
really helpful. We'll jump in there right after this Zoom, because we have some questions too about fundraising and communications and all those tools. So you mentioned earlier, you know, we want to put this on the calendar of everybody. So April 7th is, would it be the third annual Library Giving Day?
It will be the third Library Giving Day. Yes, April 7th.
So talk to us, like, for those who don't know, how did it start, and what can we look forward to during this sort of virtual April 7th gathering?
Yeah, so when we were at one of the library conferences that I've referenced, summer 2018, and that one was in Denver, John Award from the Seattle Public Library Foundation was speaking, and she asked the audience of probably about 100 people if they would be interested in having their own dedicated day of giving. And the model that we offered up was just like Giving Tuesday, where there would be a website with free resources that could be downloaded and a toolkit and that kind of thing. The audience overwhelmingly said yes, that was something that they were interested in. So we worked with Jonna to come up with the concept, and then we're Carlbloom, we're an agency. We have the capability of making websites and designing emails and designing, you know, logos and social media ads and things like that. So we created a website, librarygivingday.org, and we created all of these free resources that could be downloaded. And it was a really great experience. Many libraries joined the movement, which is what we call it. They signed on for the first year. They ran their own campaigns. We know that I believe it was approximately $750,000 was raised by the libraries that reported their results. Some did not report their results. I want to say that the second year, which was 2020, which was, I believe it was in mid to late April, was Library Giving Day last year. I mean, think about it. We're all in the thick of coronavirus. We have no idea what's going on, but we encourage the libraries to fundraise anyway, to keep going, but to change their messaging to be appropriate, to say that they knew what was going on in the community, that they were there to support the community through this difficult time as an essential service. The fundraising far exceeded what we thought would happen during this time of crisis. And I believe it was over $1.1 million was raised by a similar number of libraries. So the communities really showed up when asked.
That's great.
It is great. And so with that being said, I'll say if anybody's listening and thinking about doing a campaign, April 7th this year, you should feel confident that your community will come out for you.
Awesome.
Wow,
and once again, once again, we'll share that web address. And I think it's a nice thing to rally all year round, but I kind of like that you're directing people, like you said, Giving Tuesdays in our minds. So Library Giving Day too.
You mentioned Seattle in passing, and when you spoke to us, you talked about Seattle and also St. Paul. Talk about how those foundations function and you know why those have been such effective and impactful groups.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that they're both very strong, large fundraising organizations, and they have great, strong boards. They are very sophisticated, but not everyone started that way. Many foundations start with a small board and just some goals, and the board really pushes, because they love the library system, they really push for the library to be better. And so I think you're seeing two libraries that for 20 to 25 years have had that drive and that push and have been adventurous. So if your board is adventurous and agrees with certain fundraising tactics or certain appeals to the community, certain PR campaigns, advocacy campaigns, you know, the board does make a lot of the final call. If the board is aligned with your mission in growth, as those two libraries have been, then I think that's when you see success. Then from that, once you have a little bit of funds and you can hire more staff members, that's also when you start to see success. We know of many libraries that have one super dedicated, hardworking person. If you live in a community that is large, like Seattle or St. Paul, and you have the capacity to really grow into these outer areas, these outer counties, you live in a metropolitan area, you can bring on additional staff members and really let the professionals do their part. So it does definitely have to do with the areas of the country that these libraries are in, but I think it also has to do with the board members and the staff being really ready to ramp it up and try new things.
Excellent. That's great advice.
That's great. I've got one other library that you mentioned to us when we talked, the Toronto Library Foundation. What are they up to?
They are a great group, and I wish I knew them a touch better. We don't work with them quite as much, but I've heard wonderful things coming out of there. And what lovely woman Jennifer Jones is actually on the committee that picks the sessions for the International Public Library Fundraising Conference. Canada is an amazing country. It is very diversity, equity, inclusivity centric. And that's something that I truly respect about Toronto. Also the Vancouver Public Library, those are things that they really care about. I am interested to see what they're doing as the DEI movement does go on. I know that every library is presented with opportunities to be more inclusive, and I think that Toronto and Vancouver and other libraries up north are doing a really great job of that.
Excellent. Excellent. Let's shift gears a little bit back to our shared love of public libraries.
Yes.
Do you have a memory or two from your own library travels and experience that you'd like to share?
Sure. I remember going to the San Diego Public Library during my professional travels and being amazed by their 3D printer room. Also I think their library is 8 stories tall. It's in this beautiful building with these different nooks that you can read in, and it has an archive room, and it has a beautiful space that looks out over the city. I was just so impressed with what they were able to do in the structure of that building. Seattle Public Library Foundation also has a lovely building. For me personally, my first favorite library memory is I'm pushing 40, so I remember going to the library for computer lab and playing Oregon Trail like all of the late 80s, early 90s kids.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That is cool. Wait, which library was that in?
I'm from Montgomery County, Maryland, so it would have been one of the ones around the Washington, D.C. area.
It's pretty cool. Well, we're winding down a little bit of time, but I just want to thank Christina McPhillips. You've been listening to her, and once again, she's Vice President of Business Development at Carlbloom Associates. And as mentioned earlier, we're going to throw all sorts of links in this bio and in the comments. And Christina, is there a good way for people to get in touch with you or to sort of follow along on some of the activities we've talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say great resources are the librarygivingday.org website. You can also email me at christina@carlbloom.com. It's fairly easy. And I'll get back to you and we can just chat, or I can connect you with other library leaders that might be able to help.
Excellent. Christina, it's been a total pleasure. Thank you all for joining us and watching today. We have more in store. We are excited for some of our upcoming episodes. If you have any ideas for guests, if you would like to be a guest yourself, feel free to reach out to us at info@librarylandproject.org or comment on one of these shows. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, thank you very much, and we'll see you at the library. Library Land.